All right, we're going to get started. It's 8 o'clock. Good morning. It's bright and early here. Thanks for joining us so early for this session on exploring the technology dimension of the UC DEI course design rubric. My name is Samantha Eastman, and I am a senior learning experience designer at the Excite Center for Teaching and Learning at UC Riverside. And I have 20 years of experience in faculty development, curriculum development, and that extends to informal education, experiential education, development of hybrid and online courses, web-based interactives, and multi-platform programs and services. And I'll let Kim introduce herself.
Thank you, Samantha. Hi, everybody. Hi in the room and hi to our remote participants. I'm Kim DeBucco. I'm Senior Instructional Designer at in the online teaching and learning team at UCLA. And I'm not going to say how many years of experience I've got, but in faculty development, largely with flexible and online learning, instructional design, international education program management. So yeah, diverse background. We're here today to explore with you the technology dimension of the diversity, equity, inclusion rubric that we designed. We want to give you a little bit of background to that. But first of all, our next slide. So just as we start this session, and we want to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the East Bay people, the Muwekma or Lone. This must have been beautiful country before we all landed here, and I want to acknowledge that specialness of this place. And for those who are local, you might want to stop and just reflect on the land that you're on and the beauty of that land. We pay our respects to their ancestors and elders and to all our relatives, past, present, and emerging. Yeah, so the diversity, equity, inclusion rubric it's a collaborative effort. In fact, as one of our keynote speakers noted yesterday, the UC really is the University of Collaboration. And we want to acknowledge all of these colleagues who are instructional designers across the UC system. And they're actually a working group of a system-wide group called the Instructional Design Faculty Support Community of Practice. We have a community of practice that meets once a month on Thursdays. We had our face-to-face meeting earlier this week. This is a smaller working group. You might like to look to find your colleague in this list who worked on the rubric with us. The other thing that we're mindful of today is, I don't even really like calling them guidelines, but some kind of values we hold around how we run the session. We want to let's all share responsibility for including all voices in the conversation. And understand that your words can have effects on others, and consider relevance and succinctness. Compassion. All of us say odd things sometimes, certainly I do, but strive to see your mistakes and oversights and others as valuable elements of our communication process about this topic. Over to you, Samantha.
Okay, so here's the agenda we have for today. We're going to briefly cover a little bit about the rubric's history, give you an overview of the layout and how to use it, who's using the rubric, how it's being used, and then we'll enter into a short think, pair, share activity to explore the technology dimension and take some questions at the end. Although you can feel free to put your questions in the chat for those of you who are on Zoom, and in the room can raise your hands. So we've been collecting responses through this word cloud poll at various presentations since June of 2022. And the question of the word cloud poll is, when you hear DEI, what is one word that comes to mind? And so we can see opportunity, fairness, humanity, equity, welcoming, acceptance. And as you can see, belonging is front and center. And I wanted to point that out because it's remained front and center for a very long time since its inception of this poll. And according to the authors of the book, What Inclusive Instructors Do, Principles and Practices for Excellence in College Teaching, the authors indicate that there are two essential elements of inclusion that are, one, social belonging, and two, an equitable learning experience. So the book goes on to use Strayhorn's 2019 definition of belonging as a student's perceived social support on campus, a feeling or sensation of connectedness and the experience of mattering or feeling cared about, accepted, respected, valued by, and important to the campus community or others on campus, such as faculty, staff, and peers. And the authors state that there is evidence that social belonging is associated with higher achievement, particularly for students from marginalized groups.
Great, thanks. I might just go open this side.
Sure.
So I can see the screen as well. So if you are interested in the rubric now, you could scan this, and there's also a tiny URL which we'll put in the Zoom chat. And so you can, but we will explain the rubric. I'm going to explain it now a little bit more, the background to it and how we put it together.
So this link goes to a public drive folder where there are multiple versions of the rubric in both Word and Google Doc or PDF formats, as well as documents and recommendations for use and DEI resources at each campus. And you'll see that at the top of the rubric document, there's an explanation of what the rubric is for. I'm going to just exit the slides and show you the public folder. This is the public folder. We have a Word version, PDF version. Here's campus DEI resources and how to use the rubric. So the top of the rubric, if you take a look at it here, you'll see that it says this rubric seeks to support the intentional development of equitable and inclusive higher education courses by individual practitioners, as well as course design and delivery teams. It's not exhaustive. It's meant to guide and focus discussion and decision-making, particularly around course design, really with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as research and best practices. And many of the suggested guidelines adopt a universal design for learning framework and are effective teaching and learning practices in general. So I apologize, I'm not showing you more of the rubric. So this is what it looks like, and we'll get into the layout here shortly. So that's what's there. Oh, wrong slide deck. Okay.
So how did the rubric come about? So a little bit of background. We all know what happened in 2020 in March, but then a few months later that summer, with the tragedy that befell George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement emerged and became really important on university campuses. The Asian American Pacific Islander groups drew more attention to issues and violence that was happening towards their community. And what happened was that diversity, equity, inclusion became a real imperative in higher ed, in our universities. You would have noticed that around that time, suddenly there were messages coming out from your leadership. Everyone was starting to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in the university. The IDFS that I mentioned before, the community of practice of instructional designers around the UC system, was meeting every month. And at some of those monthly meetings around that time in July and August, everyone wanted to talk as well about diversity, equity, inclusion. And we there was a twofold need that, I saw at the time. One, I thought this was an opportunity for instructional designers to reflect on our work as designers and developers. Who are we? What are we modeling? How do we embody diversity, equity, inclusion? And also, and this is actually what the group opted for at the time, we also talked about the need for resources for instructional designers and instructors in creating blended or hybrid and online courses. There was a need for resources. So the group actually a small group then hived off, what we call in our community of practice, a working group came together, and that was the list of people I showed before. And we started to meet regularly. We drew on some other rubrics and found some other rubrics. And as we were working on this, we were building up a checklist of considerations for instructors. As we were working on the material, we heard from the Office of the President that they also said, can you please work on some DEI guidelines or a rubric? So they kind of elaborated on what we were doing. And we formed the subgroup. We started gathering resources and sharing material. Let's move on, I think.
And so how's the DEI rubric being used and who's using the DEI rubric? It's being used by individual instructors. It's being used by course design teams, faculty developers, instructional designers, and TAs. And they're using it for syllabus review, and they're using it for peer review of one another's courses. And faculty developers are using it for workshops. It's being shared through websites and along with other course resources. So we want you to use it, copy it, and adapt it to suit your needs. And if you do use it, we just ask that you please acknowledge the Creative Commons license.
Well, thanks. The layout of the rubric was interesting. First of all, what happened was I basically worked with rubrics. I looked at two, one from Peralta College here in this area, and they had a great online equity rubric they have. And we've been communicating with them recently, actually acknowledging their work and sharing. And there was also a rubric from University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. And taking those two documents, I actually started to sort of just draft up, just brainstormed into a Google Doc, a whole list of kind of potential criteria, if you like, for assessing DEI or for kind of considering and adding DEI into the work that you're doing, whether it's syllabus, course design, your teaching practices. And so we had this big, long checklist, but the group looked at it and said, oh my gosh, this is just too much. It's too long. How can we organize this? So we opted to do a rubric format, or what we're going to soon start calling a framework, actually. It's not a rubric, which implies judgment and assessment. We're going to be calling it a framework, but we still haven't had a formal meeting to sort of finalize that decision. What we did was we broke down all of those guidelines that were in one document. We split them up and we, first of all, assigned them into beginners, intermediate, advanced type, levels. But then we realized that's really not comfortable because diversity, equity, inclusion, as an instructor or as an instructional designer, it's always a work in progress. There's always something sort of to be working on. So we fairly arbitrarily broke it up into 3 columns, now, next, later. We changed the labeling. And that's just, there's no implied judgment here that you have to start it now. You could actually start it later and work backwards if you want to. It was just a visual way of organizing a lot of good ideas. And we put a notes column on the end for self and peer feedback. So this rubric, you could use yourself as an individual to evaluate your own course and your teaching. But then you could also have some dialogue with a colleague in your department if you're an instructor and share your syllabus with them, and they could use the rubric to give you feedback. So there's a peer assessment sort of possibility with the rubric. So we really designed sort of the notes, and the rubric itself is designed to really foster reflection, conversation, dialogue. And the rubric, the criteria that are there, then that's not it. This is just a starting point. There's a lot more that could be added in. Currently, the working group is actually working on revising it. We're going to be meeting in a couple of weeks and actually going through each of the dimensions and refreshing, checking. At the time in 2020, a lot of this was kind of like, oh, it's new, or we're gathering together a lot of good ideas. Now we need to go back and with the wisdom now that we've gathered in the last sort of 3 years and refine it further and perhaps add in new items, takes out certain obvious ones. And very quickly, we organize the rubric around 8 dimensions. They run down the left-hand side if you look at the rubric. I won't go through all of them now, but today we wanted to use the opportunity at UC Tech, particularly to focus on the technology dimension of this rubric. So we're here to sort of get your feedback on that. please. We've got an activity planned, so.
Yeah, so we're going to transition now into the activity portion of our session, and we're going to introduce a Think, Pair, Share activity. So what you see here is a QR code and a link to some activity slides that can serve as a note-taking and collaboration space optionally, that you can later use to share your thoughts, observations, and findings. So I'm going to escape out of the presentation and show you the activity slides. So each of these is exactly the same. The idea is that you would just choose one, copy and paste one if there are not enough for everyone, and create one of your own to get started on. You can list your members, and then these are the prompts that we have for our activity, just to give you space to collaborate, to take notes, and then later share out. So back at the presentation deck, we're going to get started with the think portion. And for the first part, we'd like you to take 4 minutes each to independently look at the rubric. Just think about it. Just familiarize yourself with the rubric overall, and then focus on the technology dimension. And then think about whether you would add a new strategy or switch out a strategy that might be missing. And then we will pair up, and you can do some discussion with a partner, and then share out later on. So
we'd like you to focus particularly on the technology dimension. That's where we can really draw on your expertise, I think, over here.
Yeah, I'm just backing up to this particular slide because it links both to the activity slides and also to the public folder, as well as the individual versions of the rubric. So you have all of it. Yes, I'm gonna go into slideshow view. Yeah. Okay, so 4 minutes, and we'll reconvene here at 8:21. So I'll give you guys some quiet time to just familiarize yourself with the rubric and the technology dimension in particular. The prompts are also in the activity slides. Okay, great. So we've had a few minutes to look at the UC DEI course design rubric and think about familiar strategies and whether you'd add anything or take something away. And so now we're going to switch over to the pair portion of our session. So we'd like for those of you who are in person to find a partner. And
let's up and move and in the room.
For those participating online, this is going to be an independent exercise unless you would like to collaborate with one another using the Zoom chat, with the option of using the activity slides to collaborate there.
You could back channel in the Zoom.
Yeah, you can back channel in the Zoom chat if you would like to pair up with someone else who's on Zoom. And you'll have 8 minutes to pair up and discuss, or work independently if you're online, and then we'll reconvene for sharing back out to the whole group. So let's see, at 8:30 we will reconvene. So go ahead and find a partner and think about what's familiar, what's new or could be newly introduced, or what's missing.
Okay, we're going to come back, sort of reconvene for a whole group kind of debriefing on this, which is tricky because there's everyone out there as well who's working on Zoom. And thank you for joining us today. We've got probably a larger remote audience than we have in the room, which is interesting. Just want to acknowledge what you've been doing. We've got some notes that have come up in the slides. Sheila and Eric, thank you. You've sort of said the familiar strategies. You said, overall, I think your tech dimension is really good. I like how you make sure the tech portion in a course is inclusive and accessible to all. Is my mic working? Yeah, I've got it switched on. it's important that not having tech not affect a person in their coursework. I also like you make sure to provide videos or anything else someone with a disability may need for extra assistance. So thank you. First of all, that tells us we're kind of on the right track, and we'll appreciate that. This feedback, by the way, is going to be shared with the group that's been working on this so-called rubric or framework. And first of all, I guess I'd really love some feedback in the room or online. Use the chat. Any other kind of comments about how it is at the moment? I mean, what we've got there in that technology dimension. Is it robust, or any thoughts that you might have had some conversation with the person you're sitting with, just as it stands? Oh, we've got another one here, Dana. Hello, Dana. Nice to know you're there. You said, in terms of familiar strategies, making sure the institution lists tech tools needed and where to find support. That's great. Yeah. So maybe we could sort of just check that that's familiar. You recognize that particular strategy. Any other comments on what's already there? Anyone want to say anything about this dimension in the rubric?
Hi, my name is Jill. I'm from ECSF, and I really appreciate all the work that has gone into this. And I've seen it before, and it's been very helpful. So I just want to start with that. And we were talking about how how it's important to know what's happening with the students. So maybe considering some method for getting student feedback, and that could apply to any part, but actually having a tech survey that says,
survey, that's great.
That's maybe, it depends on the course or whatever you're working in, but maybe, shortly into the course and then after the course, just getting that tech feedback. Could they access everything? What was working for them? How do they communicate with their peers and faculty and the other ways? So just different dimensions of the tech experience and getting that student feedback built into the course.
Fantastic. So, could I ask someone who's online, could you go into this document that we've got up on screen and add that suggestion? That's really a good idea. So a tech survey during or after. And again, what were the sort of points you were saying to find out from students, finding out their experience? Let's type this into the document as we go.
Yeah, thank you for typing for me. Well, I'm in medical education, so we check in on the apps.
The apps,
how they access the technology, what tools they're using, or can they access VPN? So we're checking in on that. What's their internet quality at home?
Oh, that's a good question. Internet quality at home.
We definitely make sure they can use, can they access everything on their mobile device, whether it's an iPad or a phone. Sometimes we ask, and about communication tools as well. So how are they communicating with faculty, with each other? So that helps us think about, do we want to buy an enterprise license for Slack, for example? And sometimes there are other dimensions that are really simple, like for in-person lectures, can you hear the lecturer? Can you see what's being pointed at? I mean, just real simple logistics of technology. Can you hear what's being said in a lecture cast? Can you see what's being pointed at in a lecture cast? So any aspect of technology in their experience, whether it's remote, hybrid, or in person, just checking in on that and getting their feedback. Thank you.
Fantastic. Oh, and Margaret, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry. Just because we were talking about this, one of the things that I have noted in the rubric is the now column makes reference to there is information about where and how students can get assistance for the required course technology. And then the next column says resources for technology help are provided in context, which in my head means like right next to where the activity is, right? So not just listed in the syllabus, here's how you could get tech help, but like right next to where there's a video. If this video isn't playing, you can contact these folks, right?
Good point.
And I really like that. And I think that's another thing that could be in a tech survey is like when you encountered a tech problem, student, were the resources readily available for like, were you able to quickly get it resolved? And like, what resources can we embed in our materials to make sure that you can get your tech issues resolved? Because there's never going to be there is never going to be a course that does not occasionally have a tech issue, right? Like, and so gathering as part of that feedback survey, finding out from the students if the support that was linked in the course materials was sufficient, or what else could be linked in there, if that makes sense.
Great. I'd be really grateful if someone who's online can type some of these suggestions into the document that's collecting the feedback. That would really help us.
Yeah, I'm watching.
Fantastic. Thank you. What's that, sorry?
We'll have a recording.
Yes, we'll also have the recording, I guess, to check as well.
I just wanted to
You're
point
right.
out someone right here. I want to see more allyship statement.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could explain the allyship. Is there someone who
that-
can explain?
I don't know if it was someone in person or online. I don't think online
Yeah,
participants can unmute.
ally. I mean, I immediately think you mean ally in Canvas, the ally accessibility, usability checking tool that's built into Canvas at UCLA. But maybe someone else could explain. Could you elaborate on what you mean? Because I'm only guessing and assuming at the moment. Allyship statement. Maybe
Yeah.
that was the guidelines at the beginning of the session. I'm not sure.
If this is an online participant, maybe you could just add a more detail or elaborate here
Elaborate.
on the slide.
Thanks. I noticed that Sheila and Eric also put a comment, a suggestion about a chatbot. So I wanted to go back to that. Yes. Great suggestion.
Hear from them.
Sorry.
Hear from them.
Oh, yes. Great.
Hi, I'm Shaylee. Yeah, like I said, sometimes students usually are working on work late after hours, like at 12. We probably shouldn't be doing that, but sometimes we have tech problems and we can't contact a person because it's after hours. So having like a chat bot where it's like automated messages from AI could be really helpful.
That's an awesome suggestion. Thank you. Yeah. We'll have to talk to our various campus IT people and look at what's integrated into our learning management systems like Canvas to see what's possible. But I think that's a great idea. There may also be services in our IT services teams that provide that kind of assistance too. But we need to say something more clearly about that in this rubric. So thank you. Yeah.
Maybe over here. Did you guys want to share?
Microphone first. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, we're just running around the room here with the microphone for those of you who are joining us remotely.
Yeah, hi, Joseph here from UC Berkeley. A couple of things further to Jill's suggestion, which I think is fantastic. We have here at Berkeley the STEP program, which is Student Technology Equity Program, which is there to support students in getting access to the technology they need. So it's if they need a laptop or a hotspot or something like this. I think your rubric, I try to remember to include that in the syllabus. You know, how can, because this is one of the big issues we've seen, especially through the pandemic, is how can students access the technology they need? And it's an equity issue because some students don't have the means to get the technology they need to access these courses. So that was one thing. And I think your rubric pretty much covers it. We talked about Aaron here. We were in discussion about Aaron's working with students in Haas who are doing pre-tests. So there isn't necessarily a syllabus.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about, okay, this rubric could still be adapted for pre-admission tests and that kind of thing, but there's specific technology that the prospective students need to access. That was another piece we discussed. I think one question that's coming to my mind, so many of the technology, when I think about the technology dimension, it always becomes about access to the technology. Can students access the technology they need? And I'm just wondering, I don't have an answer to this, but I'm wondering what the diversity dimension might be of technology. You know, how does access to technology, maybe the access is the way into the diversity dimension with technology specifically, but how are different populations, what kind of differences do they have in interfacing with technology?
Yeah,
I
and
don't know.
learning how to use it. And,
Yeah.
you know, what opportunities do they have to sort of learn from somebody else or have tutorials online and videos to learn how to use a certain tool or application? It's a good point. I was just discussing too, there is a really weird dimension of this, a weird aspect of this dimension in remote proctoring. And we have cases where webcams obviously don't read skin color very well and red flag students. And that's a very extreme example of where technology is letting us down in terms of diversity, I think. That's a little bit left field, but yeah. Margaret.
You had asked for somebody to expand on the allyship statement slide.
Yeah.
So somebody did. So it's just one more slide. There you go. So there's another, do you want me to read it out loud?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So this person had written, I want to see more allyship statement, and then expanded it to say, so usually a person with privilege, not marginalized group of people, doesn't participate for this type of activity as much. So I'd like to see more strategy of how to include that group. So that might tie into what Joseph was saying with diversity, like how is that being addressed within the technology? I don't want to expand. I don't want to put words in the mouth of this, put words in the text of this person who wrote that, but I just wanted to point out that they had expanded on their statement there.
Okay.
I think maybe that suggestion, it's a great suggestion. Thank you for that contribution. And I just think maybe it applies more broadly than to the technology dimension per se, and could be present in other dimensions in the rubric already. But I think there are probably ways we could incorporate something about that into the technology dimension as well.
Yeah, I think we've got some really useful suggestions here to discuss with our team that's developing this and revising it. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be meeting. I want to thank everyone for your suggestions and for really thinking more deeply into this particular dimension. We've only got about a minute left, so I think we'll just move on to invite feedback. And so, yeah. If you'd like to give more feedback or put your comments in another document, if you've got further thoughts we haven't addressed today, please use the QR code or the, well, we've got a listserv as well, which is not very active, but if you want to make it active, we'll know. We'll be getting the messages. But one way or another, we'd really appreciate more feedback. We take it back to the group, we discuss it, and we act on it. We'll certainly improve the rubric with that.
Thanks for your contribution.
Thank
for
you,
your
everyone.
participation.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.